What's up, gang? I'm Follygon here with your daily dose of ZBrush and work motivation. This is part 2 of our Goblin speed sculpt. Go ahead and pause this video now if you haven't watched the first one. You can find a link to that video in the description down below. Go watch that before you start this one and come on back. In this video, I'll be finishing up our character and working more on some paint, as well as showing you guys some processes for render passes and getting your sculpt into Photoshop to comp all those render passes together. This concept is by Jonathan Fletcher, and you can find a link to his art station in the description. Awesome artist, go check his stuff out. Alright, now into our sculpt, working on the paint a little bit. I'm going to take a look at this guy's body. I'm going to attempt to figure out what I'm going to do with this mouth. I believe I end up just painting the inside black, and I'll show you a little bit about the process that I use for that later. So I go a lot into some of the paint stuff that I've done here on this guy. I talked a little bit about it in the last video in part 1 of this guy, but here I go a little more in depth as far as just throwing on a bunch of different colors. I break the symmetry a little bit later on, or actually pretty soon here shortly. You know, I'm gonna take a look at these eyes here, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So for these eyes, the process that I typically do is just go ahead and fill them with a singular color. For this guy, his eyes were a little bit yellow. Real quick here, just commenting on that little like fractal kind of pattern that you saw in the eyes. If you're attempting to smooth out your colors between subdivision levels in paint, it doesn't really work. And I was trying to do it there. I completely forgot about this little thing in ZBrush. But what you want to do is keep all your paint on essentially one subdivision level, and you can use some layers to kind of break that up and mix paint and do some other stuff. But here, I just like to work on a single layer. If I make a mistake, you know, I can just undo that or try a few different things. Breaking symmetry here, I go into transpose mode, just T-pose your mesh, make sure all your subtools are visible that you want to work with at the same time. And this is just the first of 2 T-pose meshes that I do here in this video. But during this one, I just do a quick edit at the body, or I'm sorry, an edit on the body, and I realized that I want to make some more changes before I go breaking symmetry completely here. Right now I just want to block out some of the larger shapes on the back, some of the larger muscle groups. I want to look at kind of just getting the trapezius in there, as well as some of the teres muscles. You know, I'm not really trying to go super detailed, especially with a part of the character that's not going to be seen. But I at least want to get a little bit of something in there just so it can kind of allude to some of the anatomy of the character, as well as just throwing in a sphere here for some deltoids. I don't do a ton of work on these, but I just throw in the sphere, throw in a cylinder for the arm, and I mess with this a tiny bit, and I think it's important to see this even though I just get rid of it later. But it's important to try different things and, you know, kind of figure out what route you're trying to take. Really, there's only like 4 brushes that I'm using when I'm doing something like this. But you know, I'm just using that Alt pinch function that I've talked about before. It's really good for getting those hard lines that I'm trying to get there between the trapezius, as well as just using a clay tubes to really quickly just block out some spine, you know, give them some nice hard nips there, because every goblin has just super cut glass hard nips. Throw some quick paint on the body. You know, I'm just using the standard brush with color spray and one of the Alpha 07 or Alpha 08s. I like to use both of those. And I just quickly splatter some paint on there and then cut the rest of the body off. I'm not even going to need it. I want most of the focus to be on the head of the character anyway. That's where I'm putting all the work. And now I'm going through and filling the mouth with some black paint with the color spray and the alpha on as well, just to kind of break up the black there. My objective there is to kind of just hide the inside of the mouth. I don't want that to be visible when I go to render this out. Finally, I dynamesh the lower jaw back into the head. So it's all one piece now. And then I go through and use trim dynamic and some alternative smooth. I'm not really sure what it's called, but it's when you use the smooth brush and you hold shift, and then as you're smoothing you release the shift, and it performs a slightly different kind of smooth modifier than the standard smooth. Working on the eye there a little bit, I realized that I had symmetry turned off, so instead of undoing all that, I go over to the left eye, because if you use the mirror and weld function, because he is symmetrical still, except for the eye that I just kind of screwed up. If you use the mirror and weld function, it goes from left to right across the x-axis. So instead of undoing the changes that I made, I took a look at the right side kind of as reference as I made those changes again to the left side of the eye, and then turned on symmetry, mirror and welded across the x-axis, and then I was pretty much exactly where I wanted to be. Messing with the ear a little bit more, trying to get a little bit more definition on the shapes of the ear, just creating a little bit more texture and color there as well, filling in some of the parts I forgot to paint on the head. And then here on the mouth, what I do is I isolate the inside portion of the mouth, that slight little mouth bag that exists currently, because I don't want that. And then once that's isolated, I perform a close holes operation on that when it's only the only part visible, and then it makes everything revisible. While closing those holes, I can do a Dynamesh. It gets rid of that mouth bag, and then I just have a little bit more geometry resolution to work with, because Dynamesh doesn't have to worry about that geometry that is in the inside of the mouth that serves literally no purpose. From here, I go ahead and do my second T-pose mesh that I was talking about earlier. Just gonna go ahead and break symmetry all over this character, give him a slight little tilt and lean off to the side, mess a little bit more with his facial features, his expression, kind of just the way his face is shaped, just a few little changes to his nose, as well as his hair and his ears. So after I'm done making those changes, I T-pose him back into his subtools, and from there, I go ahead and throw a little wart onto his nose. The wart is the most important part of this entire character, I would argue. So just throw a little sphere on his nose, delete that excess geometry after duplicating that subtool. Throw a little bit of paint on there just to get an idea of what it's gonna look like. I end up Dynameshing it into the entire body, or I'm sorry, into the head later, just so I can kind of get rid of that sharp transition that's between that sphere and the nose. Now I just throw some warmer colors in there, some oranges, some yellows, just trying to brighten up the character. I don't want him to be one solid dark green. I want to get some warmer tones in there, lighten up that wart, give a little character to it. Another great way to insert new geometry into your scene, instead of just duplicating your tool and creating extra geometry. So for example, like that body that I have for that goblin, let's say it's 10 million polygons, and it's not in this instance, but I don't want to duplicate that and really bog down my scene. The duplicate, delete extra geometry process that I normally do for adding geometry into my scene is just a quicker method for me, the quick and lazy way. But instead you can, I used a curved tubes brush to create that necklace, wrapped it around his neck, selected only the necklace, and did a split hidden function. And you can find that in the tool palette under all your split functions though. I have it set to a hotkey menu though, just for quick use. A great method for figuring out where something is, or finding out more information about any button or any item in ZBrush, if you hover over that object and hold the control key, it will display more information about that item. Also, if you alt-click any button in the ZBrush user interface, it will pull up the palette or menu or submenu of exactly where that item is. I mess with the necklace a little bit more here and then go ahead and isolate the arm of my goblin. What I'm attempting to do here is get a clear view of the round part of my goblin's arm, because when you're using a insert mesh brush like I am here, and you click and drag off the mesh while holding the control key, it will wrap around that geometry. And I wanted that to only wrap around the arm, so that's why I isolated that there. Finally, I throw on a little bit more paint here onto the body, as well as going through the hair with some paint and a snake hook brush. I do not have AccuCurve on for the snake hook brush. It doesn't work exactly the same way as the move brush. It's a little bit more strong and the effect is a little bit too sharp. So the snake hook brush by itself works pretty well for any type of shape that you're trying to get that's similar to this. I would be careful with the snake hook brush though. It's very easy to kind of go overboard with it, and it can become very obvious very quickly kind of what process you use, and it can oftentimes turn out fairly bad. After pulling out all those shapes on the hair, I go back through and think about maybe adding some more details on it, but then I kind of remember that it's going to be in the back of the character. It's just an illustration from a single view, so I decide to opt out of that and just kind of leave the hair where it is for now. I go around on my model, do a tiny bit more painting, switch some materials around, and then I get ready to grab some render passes. I am on the side of grab as many render passes as you possibly can for your model. Here you can see me grabbing a different light perspective. So if you go into your light menu, you can swap where your light is shining from. If you click on that sphere, you can get a backlight, which you saw me grab there. Click on it again to bring it up to the front. You can click and drag, move that light around. You can add multiple lights to your scene, different colors. Right now I'm grabbing a few different material passes, get some skin, get something that's reflective. Sketch toy plastic is great for getting something that looks very wet. I also go ahead and grab a few different skin passes, some skin shaders, some of my own personal materials, and then I wrap it all up by grabbing an albedo pass, which is just your diffuse flat color, as well as an ID mask. An ID mask will allow you to select different color blocks of your mesh, different materials, that sort of thing in Photoshop. And the way you do that, you go up in the Photoshop menu and click Select, Color Range, and click your color ID that you would like to select. And then you can kind of click and drag on the influence of that slider to maybe widen or shrink that selection. From here, I just lay out my main render passes, which are all my different light setups with my materials and all that in one place. I use a few different blending modes with some opacities to kind of figure out what's going to look best for that. And then I kind of cycle through some of my different render passes for skin or for that shiny toy plastic that I mentioned before, attempting to get that wet look on the eyes, a little bit on the teeth, and some around that necklace. You'll see me jumping back and forth between that clown pass at the top. That's the material ID that I was talking about before. That's what you use for your ID selection under Select Color Range. From there, you can select either your body here in this case, or your eyes, your teeth, the necklace, the armband, for instance. Not the wart, unfortunately. That doesn't have its own color ID. If I didn't mention before, the way you do that in ZBrush is you have your angle set, everything's ready to go for your model. You turn on flat material and assign each object on your character or in your scene or what have you their own individual color. So in this case, I used solid red for the body, and then I used green for a different object. And you want to use colors that aren't too close to each other, because with the Select Color Range feature within Photoshop, you want to be able to kind of drag that slider up as high as you can without it influencing and growing on another color selection. You want to do that to kind of help soften your selection so it's not incredibly strong. You can also alleviate some of that by doing some anti-aliasing in your Photoshop, in your ZBrush render. Finally, I just do a soft, kind of gradation. I'm not exactly sure what that word is. Just doing a soft erase on the lower portion of his body, so the transition is a little bit nicer down there, not so hard. Then I throw some white paint on some parts of his body that I would like to be a little bit more glossy, do a Gaussian blur on those, and just kind of hide them a tiny bit using the opacity slider just to get a feel for what that looks like. And then I go through and make just a few little changes to some parts that are a little too distracting for my liking. If you have any ideas for future videos you would like to see, please post them in the comments below. If you want to follow me for updates, I'm on every single social media platform ever. You just have to look really hard. But if you want the main ones, you can find links to my stuff down in the description. Go ahead and click that subscribe button if you want to be notified of new videos right here on YouTube, which just so happen to be uploaded every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And finally, you should probably know what I'm going to say here by now, but thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned something new, and I'll see you next time. Yes, that is correct. I am speaking into a blanket. There's a shit ton of foam stuff down here as well, attempting to dampen the reverb and echo that is in this room right now. I'm actually, here real quick. So I got some foam up on the wall here and some foam up on the wall over here. So I'm attempting to dampen the echo that I have in this room. It's pretty bad, so that's hence the whole blanket stuffed with foam down here that we got going on. Hopefully this alleviates the reverb. I have a mic stand in the mail. It's on its way here. It's actually supposed to get here today. After I get that mic stand set up, I'm gonna set up some kind of structure to where I can build a blanket around that to dampen some of the reverb that we're getting, as well as place a lot more of that foam up around. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for being understanding. This audio stuff's really hard to get correct, so hopefully we can get this all set up here quickly and fast, get it all working, get this ball rolling. So thank you. Oh shit.